Streaming 24/7.
24/7.
Bold Moves Radio.
Bold Moves Radio.
Afrika nakupenda sana. Oh, Afrika nakupenda sana.
Africa, nakupenda sana, go Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, you know when you hear that sound that you have an appointment with us and the African Experience. This is Dr. Hlami Ngwenya. I'm often not alone. I'm with my co-host, Aventina Mabunda. Before I call on Mandla, let me remind you what the African Experience is all about. This is the show where we profile Africa, we profile, people, we celebrate the richness of the continent. We tell the African story in the African way. And yes, in the platform, we don't disappoint. We bring in, very beautiful powerhouses, people who have a story to share. You may recall that since we started, we have been bringing different kind of people from the academic space, entrepreneurs, you name it. Mandla, good evening, my sister.
Evening, Doc. I cannot wait for yet another powerful session with yourself. It's always a beautiful time to spend with you, talking to people all over Africa. I feel like I know the whole continent now, just from the show alone. So I cannot wait to be inspired by yet another powerhouse. So thank you, Doc.
Yes, I know. I mean, last week and that other week and all that, we're bringing experienced people who have stories to share, and people were really joining us online, and we appreciate our listeners. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are bringing somebody from the academic space. Her name is Professor Sope Williams. Professor Sope Williams, welcome to the African Experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hlami. Thank you so much for having me. It's really my honor to be here and to be among your really esteemed lineup of guests that you've had on the show. So thank you so much for inviting me and for having me on the show.
Wow, you look stunning. You look stunning. I couldn't help, I saw my two ladies having like nice, dukes, and I'm like, I have to rock mine as well. Wow, you really, really look stunning. Madam, look at that. Look at these African women. Wow, wow. This is what the African Experience is all about. Dr. Sope, I know our listeners are waiting patiently to know who you are. Who is Sope in the nutshell?
Okay, so to describe myself, I'll say that I'm an adventurous person who loves life. My highest values, if I can put it that way, are integrity, play, fun, gratitude, and just playfulness and enjoying myself. So I love to travel. I have a real love for travel. I love to travel by myself. I take a lot of solo trips. I love to travel with my children as well. I love having new experiences. I love experiencing new cultures. I love trying new foods. In terms of my profession, I'm a lawyer by training, and I work in academia, as you've said. But because of my love for travel, my love for adventure, I've lived and worked in 5 countries, and I travel often for work and for holidays, for play. I just like being out there. I like seeing what the world has to offer. I like enjoying what God has created. I just like this earth, and I like enjoying it and experiencing it.
Okay, maybe while we are still there, so when we look at your profile, you were born in Nigeria and now you live in South Africa. And from your introduction, you indicated that you worked in different countries. Tell us a little bit more about that before we go to your professional, journey and all that.
Yeah. Well, I was actually born in Switzerland. I was born in Geneva. My parents were my dad rather was a diplomat, and he got a posting just before I was born. My mom was already pregnant with me when they moved to Switzerland, and we lived there till I was 6. But I am Nigerian. I am Nigerian by birth. And so we lived in Switzerland for a while. We moved back to Nigeria, and I did most of my studying in Nigeria. So I finished primary school in Nigeria, and high school and university in Nigeria. My bachelor's degree was in Nigeria, and then after my bachelor's degree, I moved to to England. I moved to the UK, and I did a master's in law in London at the London School of Economics. And then I started working straight after the master's. So I got a job in academia in a town in Scotland where I was for a while. So my and since and then after that I worked in other places, and then coming to South Africa, I think 8 years ago now in 2016. So really just have spent the last 8 years in South Africa. But prior to that time, I worked in universities, two universities in the UK, one in England, one in Scotland. I moved to Nigeria for spent some time in Nigeria as well, and then from Nigeria I was here.
Wow. Sounds so interesting. You know, you paint such a colorful journey. And I like the fact that you know what, you are an African child through and through. And now, you know, before we even go into your academic journey, I want to understand why have you chosen, if you have, that is, settle in South Africa for the longest period, or what motivated that?
I think I'll say it was a divine appointment, but South Africa, I mean, it's for me, it's the best country that I've lived in, right? In terms of South African universities, they are world class. I said already that I worked in universities in the UK. And now, having spent extended periods of time in South Africa at Stellenbosch University, where I'm based now, and at UCT for a sabbatical some many years ago, South African universities are, they easily rival UK universities. In fact, the first time I spent time at UCT, I was surprised that UCT and Stellenbosch libraries were better than the libraries in the UK where I was working. The facilities were much better. The staff was equally as excellent. And South Africa has a very, for me, has a very spiritual quality, if I can say that. It feels like home. As I've said, I've lived in different places, but South Africa, even though I'm not South African, right, it's the place that my heart, my heart feels
Yeah.
comfortable in. It's the place that my soul sings. When I land at Cape Town International, I
Yeah.
genuinely, my soul feel like I'm home.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, being in South Africa is just a divine appointment, but one that I was so happy to keep, because South Africa is an exceptional country.
Great.
Wow, wow, wow. So now let's go back, to your academic journey. And I know you said you are actually a lawyer by training. First of all, what drew you into the legal space, if I may ask? What inspired you to actually follow your career in the legal space?
Right. Okay. So I didn't initially want to be a lawyer. In fact, from primary school, I'll say I wanted to be a medical doctor, and that's always what I wanted to be. But at the time I got to, I think it was, I want to say grade 9. And I think in grade 9, then you had to choose your subjects, which would determine whether you were going into the sciences or the arts when I was studying in Nigeria in high school. And at that time, my mother had just started doing a second degree in law, and she was enjoying it so much. And, she really convinced me that lawyering was a lot more exciting than medicine. And so when I was choosing my subjects for grade 9, I chose, the subjects that would be necessary to study law, English literature, economics, things like that. And I didn't choose the science subjects at all. So that's how, and with the Nigerian education system, then, you make those choices and you make them that early, and it's a done deal. You really can't switch over afterwards. So I chose my path as an arts student, as we would say, liberal arts student, and I ended up studying law at university after that.
Hmm.
So I didn't choose law in a way. My mom, my mom encouraged me. I say she
Very smart
motivated me,
woman.
and I haven't regretted it. The truth is that as I've grown to know myself, I realize how squeamish I am. Uh, I'm not good with blood or germs or diseases. I would have been a terrible doctor.
Yeah.
Terrible doctor.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. So, now fast forward, you are a professor. And surely you don't study to be a professor, you grow through the ranks and all that. just take us through the journey, from your junior degree, what did you study and how did you actually progress to be the doctor that you are? And perhaps in that narrative, you also tell us what exactly do you specialize in, because we know that the legal space is quite broad. What are you specializing in?
Okay, so I said already that I studied law in Nigeria. So I have what we call an LLB, bachelor's in law. And then after I
Mm-hmm.
completed my bachelor's in law, I wanted to do a master's. In fact, in a way, in my family, it was really expected that you wouldn't stop at a bachelor's. My parents really, really value education. So the idea was that after your bachelor's, you'll do a master's. And I wanted to do a master's overseas. And I got admission to the London School of Economics, which is based in London. I went there and I did a master's in international law. But the thing is that even before, from the end of my bachelor's degree, I already had a sense that I wanted to go into academia. I was in
Mm-hmm.
school, I was quite bright. And so I used to, during when exam time is coming, then the students in the grades or in the classes below me would ask me to teach them some things. And I really enjoyed that process. I really enjoyed that process of, talking to my younger colleagues and teaching them subjects that I had already done and all that. So I enjoyed that. And I also realized that I had some really good lecturers. And I realized at some point that they had such a positive impact on me, a positive impact on my education. And I felt like I wanted to be able to have that positive impact on other people as well. So, really early on, I started toying with the idea of being an academic. Of course, at that stage, I didn't know what it entailed. I just knew that this is what I wanted to be. I didn't know how you get there. So I did my master's in England. And then after my master's, of course, the options at that time were, you go back home or you get a job in England if you find a company that hires you. And I then decided to, try for an academic post. So, but I was just coming out of my master's, so it wasn't like I had any experience. And I think I recall I applied to about 30 universities in England, and I got one call back. But as I always tell people, you only need one job. I got
Mhm.
one call back, and that was a job that I got at the University of Stirling. And and I did that job. I think I was in that job for 2 years. Yeah, I was in that job for about 2 years. And then after that, I got another job at the University of Nottingham, where I also then did my PhD. So I did my PhD a lot later, many years after I had already completed my master's. And I did it while I was working as an academic at the University of Nottingham. So that was sort of how my career journey commenced. After the master's, getting a job in Stirling, and then moving to Nottingham, doing the PhD. And then I worked in Nottingham University for, I think, about 9 years. And then I moved back to Nigeria in 2010 or 2011. And I worked at the university there before coming to Stellenbosch in 2016.
Oh wow. This is quite, it's so interesting following your story. Tell me something. It seems to me from back at home with your parents instilling a sense of education, how would you say the home environment plays a role in a journey of a developing child? Would you say that really plays a huge role, and what role do you think that plays?
Oh, I think the home environment is everything. I mean, if I think about my parents, the I mean, of course, we didn't have the technology that we have now, so we didn't have these distractions. Um, but my parents always bought us books. So we were reading from an early age. Reading was really the only form of entertainment we had if we weren't playing, physically in physical active play, riding our bicycles or things like that. So, and in terms of education, I mean, my parents never, I mean, the expectation, which was unspoken, was that you do your best at school. So there wasn't, in fact, I didn't know until I got to high school actually that people don't pass, sometimes people don't pass exams. It was never, it wasn't a possibility that had presented itself until I got to high school and I found that, oh, actually, sometimes people don't do well. Failure is a thing. So the expectation was there, unspoken but heavy, that
Yeah.
academically you do your best, that it's important to excel at your education. And so my parents prioritized that. They didn't, they would spend anything they had in order to push us and motivators for our education. So they would wield the carrot as well as the stick. Of course, you know what that means from Africa.
Yes.
so it was that, and it was, so we carried that with us. We carried that work ethic, that discipline, that commitment to seeing things through, to always doing your best no matter what you were faced with, because we didn't have the option of failing. It was like, do your best, and if you do your best, at least in let's say in for most people, barring there being any challenges or whatever, if you do your best, you will see, a result. You will have a good result.
Yep.
So that was the expectation placed on us, and so we did that. I mean, all of us did that. My older sister is a professor of medicine in the US. In fact, she's a medical oncologist. She was once listed as one of the best medical oncologists in the USA. My younger brother is a lawyer. He has an MBA. He also has a law degree. So we did that. My older sister has an MBA. She has 2 masters. She has run a school. She's, so we're always striving, right? We're always working. We're always doing our best. We're always trying to contribute. We're always trying to make a difference. And my parents instilled that you work, you do your best, you make a difference, you help. Yeah, so I would say that was our home environment.
No, thank
Wow.
you. Thank you so much, Doc. We need to go to Nigeria and visit this family. There is no way. We have to get our act together. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the African Experience with myself, Mandla Mabunda, and my good doctor, Dr. Hlami Ngwenya. Before we continue with the dynamite in the house today, good people, you better come back after the break and listen to more from this beautiful professor that we have today. So, DJ Macy, can we go for a quick ad break and then we'll come back after that?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the African Experience with me, Dr. Hlami Ngwenya and Mandla Aventina Mabunda. We are having a conversation, a really, really deep conversation with our professor, Professor Sope Williams. Yes, Mandla, I agree with you. Just before we went to the ad break, we heard about how dedication works. You have to do your best in order to achieve. And I just loved it because she was also sharing about the achievements of her siblings. I'm sure the pressure, it's really, really big in your family. If you don't do well, you're not gonna succeed. Sope, just one question again. Yes, let's go back to your legal, fraternity and all that. And we know that, it's such a huge, or maybe broad, field. What are your area of interest? I know you are in the academic space. Perhaps I could talk about your research interest. Then we talk about, the theme that you have chosen for today. What is the area of research interest that you have?
Thank you, doctor. Okay, so in terms of my research interest, I did a when I was at Nottingham, I said I did a PhD, and I actually did a PhD in public procurement and anti-corruption law. So when we talk about public procurement, we're talking about tenders. If I say tenders, everybody in South Africa knows what that means. So public procurement is that framework, the system by which the government buys the things that it needs. So you think about the government building schools, building hospitals, buying books, buying medicines, buying electricity, anything that the government buys is usually done through our public procurement system. And this system comprises of laws and institutions and things like that. So I studied public procurement and I studied anti-corruption law. Because of course, you know that if you are from Africa, whether it's Nigeria or South Africa, we can't talk about government contracts, we can't talk about public procurement or tenders without corruption raising its head. So at that point, about 20 years ago now, when I did my doctorate, I wanted to investigate, why are we always hearing about procurement and corruption in the same breath? What is the legal system that deals with procurement corruption? What does that look like? Why is that working or not working? And what can be done? So my interest came from that why do we, why is corruption so, stuck or such an integral part of our procurement system? It shouldn't be so. Of course, it shouldn't be so, and we know. So I wanted to examine from a legal point of view why this is so, and I've continued that research area. I haven't moved away from that. The thing that I'm interested in is procurement, is anti-corruption, is about thinking about new ways to mitigate corruption. And recently, I've been looking at um, other areas of corruption. So I've been thinking about gender and corruption, which is our topic. I've been thinking about gender responsive procurement, which is about looking at why businesses that are owned by women don't get as many contracts as businesses owned by men. Also thinking about why, when we build or design public services, why we don't do that in a way that considers that women are going to be the users. So a common example I always use is, you go into a public toilet, sometimes it doesn't have a light, or it doesn't have a lock, or it doesn't have something as simple as it doesn't have a hook for you to hang your handbag. Then you know that toilet was not designed with women in mind, or it doesn't have a baby changing facilities. They were not thinking about women when they designed them. So gender responsive procurement is about that. How do we make sure that our procurement system is gender friendly, if you like?
Wow. Okay. This is very interesting. And I see the link because when you introduce yourself, something that I picked, you highlighted that you are a woman of integrity. So integrity was the value that you align with. And I can see the link, in your career path where you want to understand, issues around, anti-corruption and all that. This is very, very interesting. It's unique because in most cases we hear people who are studying law. It's really your typical, legal things that are very familiar. I don't think that I have met somebody who's actually looking at, the legal aspect, the way you are doing. Mandla, what are your thoughts, my sister there?
Sure, it's quite intriguing. I've never thought about it like that. Women and gender inequality and corruption, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Being in the gender space myself, that's our daily bread, my dear. Some of them you don't even venture into the space because it's
Hmm.
just an unwritten rule, but it's there in the sky. So I'm glad that someone qualified it by actually going out to study the phenomenon. So it will be interesting to hear how your students. I gather maybe it's one of the areas that you teach your students on, and how do they receive that? Are we moving in the right direction, or are we still fighting as women to be acknowledged?
Oh, we're definitely fighting, but we're not where we were. So I think today actually marks 50 years since women could get a credit card in the US without needing their husband's signature. So it was 50 years ago on this day that women could actually have a credit card, and I think also open a bank account without a man's, without a man having to vouch for them and having to agree for them doing that. So we're not where we were, but we're definitely not where we should be. And you're right, gender inequality is exacerbated by corruption. Gender inequality, if you look at in terms of procurement or in terms of situations like you're a businesswoman, the fact that businesses owned by women don't get credits from the banks, don't get business loans at the same rate as business owned by men. So women-owned businesses are financially underserved, means that women-owned businesses cannot scale or expand at the same rate as businesses owned by men. Then, of course, all these have a knock-on effect on poverty of women, and
Mm.
poverty of women has a big implication for poverty of children, for the education of children. women that are economically disadvantaged will usually not be able to give their children the best, obviously in terms of education, in terms of nutrition, in terms of health. So you see that the gender inequality perpetuates child poverty, perpetuates poverty in society, and it pulls our society back. When I talk to people about gender inequality, I always ask, imagine you were running a business and only 50% of your employees were engaged. I mean, it's an insane idea, right? Or you had, so and you think about that globally. But globally, women are about 51% of the population, but not having access to the same rights and opportunities. So what I find when I talk about this in different spaces, I find that people, first of all, there's like an aha moment. It's an awakening for people because people have never thought, especially about procurement. People have never thought about the fact that we build or we design or we buy, the government buys things and doesn't consider the users in mind, right? So you think about, if you think about South Africa's spatial issues with the townships that don't have access to pipe-borne water, and they put in these chemical toilets, they put them in locations where the path to the toilet is not lit. So women who are going there at night are using their phone torchlights, then they are robbed of the phones. There was a study done some years ago that they can attribute in Kayalicha alone 635 rapes and sexual assaults of women who are trying to go to these toilets at different times of the day, just because the toilets don't have locks on them, they're on paths that are not lit, the toilets themselves don't have light. So you're a woman, you're taking your baby to the toilet to get changed, or you're taking your disabled relative or your elderly parent or relative, because this is what women do. We are the caregivers, right? So we're using these facilities much more than they're being used by men, but they're still designing them as if the users are men. If you think about going to even to going to a mall, you see that women are always lining up outside the public toilets, but the toilets for men don't have, they don't have as many users, just because women toilets access them at a different way and at a different rate. But we don't design these services bearing that in mind. So a lot of people, they get this light bulb moment where they're like, oh, wow, I never thought about it. And for me, it's my I see my role as just that, getting people to understand, to think about what we do as society and all the ways in which we harm women because we don't think about the impact of our actions. So I teach that obviously at the university. I teach public procurement at the university, and Stellenbosch has a master's and a postgraduate diploma in public procurement, and I teach courses on corruption in procurement there as well. And at the undergraduate level, I teach about corruption, and I also teach about gender responsive procurement. And I speak at conferences all over the world, and this is what I talk about. I talk about gender responsive procurement, thinking about women, businesses thinking about women, in the design of public services, just in the hope that somebody's listening and people are listening, because I think we, we've had some movement, some traction, especially in the legal space in South Africa, and I think I can talk about that as well.
Wow. I like, these conversations because in my work, I work in the agro space and I also do a lot of work around, gender mainstreaming. But to be honest, in all the discussions that we had, it's the first time that one takes, the gender debate or discourse around, this linking it, with public procurement, which I find it very, very interesting. You said something about, the toilets, and I can attest to that. That is something that I also look at when I travel and I look at the toilet. I will tell, this was designed by a man, because women, every woman that I know, we are carrying a handbag.
Yeah.
If you go to the toilet and there's no space where you can actually hang your handbag, it just doesn't work. Then it means
Yeah.
that you have to put your handbag on the floor. So these are small things, but it does have an impact. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the African Experience with me, Dr. Hlami Ngwenya. I'm with my co-host, Aventina Mabunda. We are taking a different angle to the issues of, gender mainstreaming, where we're looking at gender and corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take another commercial break. When we come back, we continue to have a conversation with our professor. Don't go away.
24/7. 24/7.
Bold Moves Radio.
Bold Moves Radio.
Afrika nakupenda sana. Oh, Afrika nakupenda sana.
Wow, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We are talking to Professor Sope Williams. Prof, before we went on the ad break again, we were still talking about this dynamic of gender and all that. I know as we're preparing for the show, we had a conversation where you were also looking at, I'm not sure whether these are studies that you are doing, where you're looking at gender corruption, but also in terms of people, ascending, a leadership roles. Do you want to say something about that?
Okay, so let me talk about the corruption dimensions of gender, and then I can talk about the leadership after that.
Okay.
So, of course, we know what corruption is. I think everybody has you have a lived experience of it, to be honest. But one of the things, because of gender inequality, because we live in a patriarchal society, everything is really done from the lens. Even our legal system is very patriarchal. Everything is done from the point of view of men. So in terms of corruption, we have not always thought about how corruption impacts women differently from men. And what do I mean by this? There are a lot of studies that have come out recently that have shown that corruption affects women differently from men. Women victims of corruption, for instance, are experience corruption differently. So a number of things. Women are more likely to be victims of corruption because generally people who have power or resources generally view women as having less access to justice than men have to. And women are not usually it's not usually thought that women don't usually anyway would not usually speak up or report when they are facing corrupt requests and things like that. So women are disproportionately victims of corruption, but also women are disproportionately victims of what we call sexual corruption, and that is something that affects women in particular, where women are requested not for a monetary bribe, but requested to perform sexual acts as the bribe. So sex becomes the currency of the bribe. And of course, this disproportionately affects women and girls. And we're finding that it limits women and girls' access to public services and even public opportunities, such as procurement contracts. So there's so many cases of women who are entitled to RDP housing and are not given the housing because they refuse to perform sexual acts on the persons in charge. When I was doing my research on gender responsive procurement, not just in South Africa but across, I think I've done about 7 African countries now, it came from women-owned businesses, came back again. Some contracts I put it in a tender for. The next thing I get a call, I must meet somebody in this hotel or in that hotel. And so that is also acting as a barrier to women accessing public contracts. I think Mandla talked earlier about some of the barriers, the unknown, unspoken barriers, unconscious barriers we can see that women face in trying to obtain public contracts. But you add sexual corruption as a layer on top of that, then it's really problematic. I remember when I was doing this research in Tanzania and speaking to a woman business owner, and she said in Tanzania, women who obtain public contracts sometimes will not even mention it because the implication is that you have been sexually compromised for you to be able to get a government contract. So even women who should be put up there as examples, as people who have been able to navigate procurement and won, stay silent because people believe that you can't navigate the procurement contract, you can't navigate the procurement system as a woman without actually compromising yourself sexually. So there's so many dimensions in which corruption affects women differently from men. Women are disproportionately victims of corruption. Women are disproportionately victims of sexual corruption as well. And then the other thing is that even when we talk about anti-corruption, we talk about the laws that deal with corruption, they also have a differential impact on women compared to men. So I'll give an example that everyone will understand. When we talk about our laws against corruption, it's a crime for you to give a bribe as well as for you to receive a bribe. But you think about a woman who is on who wants to get an RDP house, and the official has told her, if you want your name on the list, then, this is what you have to do. It means that if that woman agrees to that request, she automatically becomes a criminalized under our legal system, meaning that she's the person who, gave the bribe, gave the sexual act, and the person who received it, the official, is also guilty of a criminal offense. But of course, you think of it in a place where a woman has faced sexual corruption for something that is important to her life, and we have women who are seeking refugee permits and things like that, access to water, to basic services, having to comply in order not to be deprived of these basic services. And you think of those women being criminalized, and it's crazy because the law does not consider that some of these victims are actually coerced. So they're not the willing, briber that you would think of when you're thinking about, a man giving a bribe to get a procurement contract or things like that. So we haven't designed our legal system, especially in terms of corruption, to really consider the way that especially corruption harms women, the way that anti-corruption law itself also harms women. We don't think about the gendered forms of corruption, and we don't think about the gendered forms of corruption control. So that's some of the things that I've been looking at recently in my research and thinking about ways on how we can change this. And if you talk about the leadership angle, so let me again give the example I gave. If you have a woman who is successful at navigating procurement, but she can't talk about it because there's a stigma attached to women accessing procurement contracts, and she cannot rise up and be a leader, rise up and mentor others. If we think about areas in which procurement or public services are not designed with women in mind, it's usually because we don't have women that are on those committees. We call them in South Africa specification committees, the committees that draft the specification for what the government is going to put out to tender. So the thing is that we're not having enough representation of women in our procurement system. And we're not, because of some of the stigma, especially around sexual corruption, we're not having these women business leaders being able to stand up in different spaces and say, look, this is how I win, because there's an implication that they have done something dodgy or something unethical. In Nigeria, one of the provinces or the states in Nigeria has decided to mandate that on every specification committee, women must be represented. On the committees that evaluate tenders, women must be represented. And the idea is to try to remove this unconscious bias away from, the way these committees work. Because the thing is that everything we do, and people really need to understand this, everything we do is gendered. Our institutions are gendered. Our thoughts are gendered. We've all been raised in South Africa, we've all been raised under a patriarchal system. So even women are the biggest gatekeepers of the patriarchy. We've also been raised under a system of white supremacy ideology. And again, and that applies whether you're black or white, whether as long as you've been educated in a country that was colonized by Western European, you were trained in white supremacy ideology. You were trained under patriarchy. And so we don't even realize that the thoughts that we have are gender, are anti-black, are anti-women, because we've just grown up on it. It's just normal to us. And it takes, it takes someone learning to come out of that. And so, especially in terms of procurement, a lot of work has to go into addressing this unconscious bias that we all have. But sometimes people can't even address it because they don't know it's there because it's unconscious. So this state in Nigeria, Ekiti State, has done a lot of work in trying to ensure that women are represented as leaders in the procurement space, in the hope that that will untangle some of the unconscious biases that women-owned businesses face. I will untangle some of the biases that women that are present when we design public services that women are going to use.
Sure. What a sobering conversation, Prof. And what makes it sad to a large extent is that we are battling something that is innate.
Yes.
Like you said, we're not even conscious of how much, number one, gender plays a role in whatever we do, and
Mm,
also the background that we're coming from, the system, in particular in South Africa. That thing has done a lot of damage, and for the most part, is the damage is internal. So
yes.
you know what? I think we need to take a step back, and I wish this type of talks would be given to schools at that level so that we start being conscious. Here in South Africa, we do have laws. We have
Mm,
set aside for black entities, for women owned, 30% set aside. On paper, it's all beautiful and well, but trust me, in reality, when you go looking for these things, all those unsaid and written things come to the fore. But you know what? We have spoken, I think, at length about the inequality situation and how we're hoping to change. What do you see before you come to your highlights and milestones in your career? What do you think we need to do to even create like a dent into this mammoth task that lies ahead of us?
Um, I'll say that it starts with individuals. So, as individuals, we need to do the inner work and unlearn the damaging things that we've learned. And we need to raise our children to do the same. We need to understand that we've received our hope. We've been programmed in a particular way. Some of it is good, but a lot of it is not. And we need to understand and undo the threads of the damaging program that we have received, and make sure that we train our children in the right way, train our children to understand their history, to be proud of who they are, not to see whiteness as something that is better than blackness, not to think of Africa as a despondent or the dark continent. The language that we use, even in talking about ourselves and talking about Africa and talking about our experiences, is also very negative. And we need to ensure that we ensure that we raise our children to be proud, to be proud to be black, to be proud to be African, to love being black, to love being African, not to prioritize any other kind of ethnicity over their own. So I would say it starts from there, and then whatever spaces we're in, we need to ensure that we work in those spaces to undo the damage and to move like what we're doing on this station, the African experience, to push the narrative that Africa is beautiful. Africans are resilient, are intelligent, are strong, are wise, are capable. And to ensure that we just keep pushing and keep doing so, keep on learning, keep relearning, keep mentoring, keep training, and keep pushing is what I would say.
Wow, and I do agree with you. Africans are intelligent. Africans, they can do things for themselves. We have seen it on this platform. We started this platform more than a year ago. And every single week, we bring, Africans that are doing extraordinary things. These are the like of you. You are such an intelligent person. Just listening to you, you can hear the depth of your knowledge, your experience. And I want to go on that because you have received awards. DJ Messi, if there's one thing that we are very good at on this platform is that we do check, our guests. We actually go through their social media platforms and pick things. And there are some pictures that we picked, and I would like DJ Messi to show those pictures. We want to ask you what is going on. We saw you receiving some awards and things like that. We want you to tell us a little bit more about that. Okay, there we go. There's a picture there. You seems to be the only African woman there. Tell us a little bit more about that. What is
Okay,
going on?
so that was in December 2022. And I was one of the recipients. There were seven of us, if you count on the platform, receiving an award it's called the International Anti-Corruption Excellence Award. And I received mine for the category of research and education. So for me, it was an award based on the work that I've done, the research work that I've done in anti-corruption, and it was awarded by the Sheikh of Qatar, is the tall gentleman in white you see there, and the president
Mm.
of Rwanda, President Kagame. So it really was one of the high points of my career. I never imagined that I would be on a global stage like this, getting this kind of award that is backed by the state of Qatar and the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. So UNODC and the state of Qatar jointly award this every year to persons who've been excellent in particular categories. And my award category was for anti-corruption research and education. So it was a great time for me in December 2022.
Wow. Wow. Hey, Mandla. I'm looking
Yo,
at this.
yeah. No, this is beautiful. I mean, this is amazing, amazing work. And I'm here thinking, you know what? We need platforms such as this so that our government, I hope they give you space and are willing to open their minds to this new reality that we need to adapt to. Do you get to do presentations for the decision makers?
Oh yes. Oh gosh, I do that a lot. So in terms of South Africa, I speak. I probably speak at public events maybe twice a month, maybe, and a lot of that is overseas. So I've spoken about gender in front of the president of Zimbabwe. I've spoken in Nigeria. I've spoken at the UN. I mean, I've spoken at so many spaces in South Africa, even when um, um, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was Minister for Women and did some work on the South African Public Procurement Bill in terms of gender responsive procurement. So I speak to decision makers, I speak to students, I speak to anyone who will listen to me about
Okay,
these things.
so there's a picture here. I see the president of Zimbabwe.
Yeah,
What
yes.
was happening? And I see an irony. I'm sure you were talking about gender issues, and I'm looking at the people that are there.
Yes. Yes. So this was in October 2023, so just last year. And I was invited by the procurement regulator in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, sorry, PRAZ. So they're called PRAZ. You can see them on the banner, Procurement
Mm,
Regulatory Office for Zimbabwe.
mm,
Um, and yeah, so and I was talking about gender responsive procurement and how Zimbabwe can do things to actually improve their gender responsive procurement, not just in terms of women getting contracts, but also I think, especially in developing countries, in terms of designing public services that support women, that don't harm women, especially. So that was in October, and I gave a talk on how procurements in Zimbabwe can be made better if they do this. Because the funny thing is that in countries that have integrated women into the procurement space, they actually find that women lower prices, provide better quality, and provide more innovative products, and are more responsive
mm.
as contractors as well. So there's so many benefits when we do that. But of course, the patriarchy is so strong that it's sometimes it sounds like you're asking for people to do something that is out of this world, when we're just really asking for the playing field to be leveled for 50% of the
Mhm.
population.
Wow.
Quite
I was just looking.
interesting. Uh-huh.
Mm. Yeah, go ahead, Mandla, go ahead.
I'm saying it's quite interesting, like you're putting it. We are just asking for the playing field to be leveled, and this is a group who takes care of everyone, including the other gender. What I find is that when a tender gets awarded to women, you see even the improvement affecting from family, immediate family, community to everyone. A lot can be said when you see tenderpreneurs of the other gender and how they choose to spend this money. But anyway, I want to know something from you, Prof. do you even relax? You know, when you speak, Doc, to activists such as Prof, you find that sometimes that's all they eat, think, drink. Tell us, what do you do for fun? You mentioned that you're a fun-loving person earlier on.
Yes, I work hard. I really do work hard. And I know I don't rest as much as I should, but I do things for fun. I think I mentioned that I love to travel. I love adventure. So I'm always thinking about what new adventurous, but non-dangerous thing can I do. So I do like to push the boat out. As I said at the beginning, I just like experiences. I like doing things that I haven't done before. I like growing through that. Okay, you found this.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so this was 2 weeks ago,
Mhm.
and I went shark cage diving in Hansby, Hansby near Hermanus.
Yeah.
And this was in my wetsuits just before we were lowered into the cages. And it's something I'd heard about people doing. At the first time I heard about shark cage diving, I was like, no man, this is not for my people, not for my people. This is crazy. But I thought about it. I thought, you know what? You only live once. I
Mm.
assessed the risks. I know that it wasn't really a risky endeavor. People think it's dangerous, but it wasn't. And the company that I went diving with had been diving for 27 years, and I've never had an incident. So we
Mm.
did it. Got into the cages, looked at the sharks, and enjoyed it. It was a special time, and I went with my daughters. So it was also a
Okay.
time to bond with them and do something new and fun with them. So I do try to
Okay.
have.
Yeah, Prof, you said, you actually Nigerian and all that. There's no way that we let you go or maybe let you off the hook without talking about the fight between the jollof rice between
Oh
Nigerians and
no!
Ghanaians.
Oh
I
God, the
know.
jollof was okay.
Yes, the jollof rice. Mm,
So I'm Nigerian, but I've traveled. I've been to Ghana many times, and I've eaten
mm,
Ghana jollof, and
mm,
it's just that it tastes different. So I guess for Nigerians, because it's not a taste that they're used to, what they think of jollof rice is not
mm,
what is presented. When it's cooked by people from Ghana. So I think that's
mm,
where the challenge is, that it just tastes different. But as I said, there's nothing wrong with diversity. It has a good taste. It's just that it's different from Nigerian jollof rice. So probably they should give it a different name because
Wow. Oh,
But
wow.
Prof, we had somebody here because okay, so we're talking about the jollof rice,
yeah.
and it turned out that actually it started in Senegal, and somebody said no, jollof was founded by the Senegalese, and it was made popular by the Nigerian, and it was perfected by the Ghanaians. That was so
But no,
funny.
they're right that it did emanate from the Wolof tribe in the Senegambia. So it is actually it's not a Nigerian food, or even from Ghanaian. But the funny thing is that every country cooks it in a different way. So even
Mm,
in the Senegambia, it's cooked really differently. And it's really tasty. I think they all taste differently, but whatever you're used to is what you normally sometimes think is best, which is why I like to travel and eat different
mm.
things. And I did go to Ghana and I tried it,
Oh,
but I won't cook it after that.
wow, that's quite interesting. Everyone has something to say about their jollof rice. I bet you can see she's this very smart academic. She puts it in her own light, but we get the gist of. But you know what? Before we let you go, we had such a great time chatting to you, and really, I'm keen to learn more. And talking about Nigeria, we always have this sort of love hate, brother sister, brother relationship when it comes to South Africa and Nigeria. What is one thing that you wish people from South Africa now could know about people from Nigeria? Just a learning tip for us.
Okay, I'll say two things. I'll say that for people that don't know the history of South Africa and Nigeria,
Mhm.
when I was growing up, the civil servants in Nigeria, um, my father's generation and older, had to give up a portion of their salary towards the struggle in South Africa. So every
Mm,
Nigerian civil servant gave up a portion of their salary to fund the struggle in South Africa. So Nigerian money is in the blood of
Wow.
of the struggle. The second thing that I know many people don't know that, but Nigeria has supported South Africa before South Africa became the country that we love and support today. The second thing I'll say about South Africa, about Nigerians, which many people don't know, or you might know but maybe don't understand the context. Nigerians are, for me, probably one of the most hardworking group of people that you will ever meet. We are able to make sense out of nonsense. We will always find treasure, even if it's in trash. We will find opportunities, even in the deserts, and we're extremely resilient. And that's why you find that a lot of places Nigerians go to, they excel. They excel there. In the US, there's been so much talk about Nigerians being the highest educated group of immigrants and things like that. But the disadvantage of that is the fact that because we work so hard and we're so dedicated to excelling, that even when we find ourselves doing illegal things, we will excel in that too.
You're dedicated.
If Nigeria gets involved in
Wow.
crime, he will excel or she will excel. So whether you give us, if we find good opportunities, we will excel. If we find terrible things to do, we will the same approach. It will be excellent in that terrible thing. So that's why you find that you might see a lot of Nigerians in doing some kind of criminal acts, and you wonder why they are so good at it. It's just because they are hardworking, and unfortunately, the opportunity that they picked up was the bad opportunity. So you have to forgive us for that. But at our core, we are hardworking, we're resilient, we want to always do our best
Yeah.
wherever we find ourselves, even if that's crime.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I think it is in Lagos, like the registration, the car registration. I think there is a city of excellence or something like that.
Yes, yes,
Even
yes. Center
even
of
on the
excellence. Yes,
registration, exactly.
that's true. That's
Thank
true.
you so much. Prof, when we are having a good time on the platform, we don't even look at the time. Oh my God, we only have a minute to go.
Yeah.
We always ask our guests to give us what we call the parting shot. What
Okay.
will be your parting shot? In that parting shot, also maybe an advice that you can actually give to someone who might be listening
Okay.
tonight.
Okay. Okay. So I think because my parting shot would be this, that for all of us, apart from everything that I've said, I always ask people, in fact, something like beg people, live authentically, live with integrity. A lot of our challenges come because we don't live with integrity. For me, my ethos is that I always try to leave people in a better place than I met them. I encourage people to have fun. Yes, there are tough times and things are hard, but have fun, laugh. Don't always be tight in your face and in your chest. you know, none of us are getting out of this earth alive. That's just it. So enjoy the time you have, enjoy your family, enjoy your work, do the best you can with the circumstances you have, strive for excellence, and enjoy yourself.
Wow, thank you so much, Prof. I know, Mandla, there are so many things that we would want to unpack, especially the gender and corruption. We could go for another session. Thank you. We really appreciate you taking your time to spend with us. We don't take it lightly. I would like to take this moment, to thank our listeners out there, but also to thank our dedicated, technical producer, DJ Messing. Mandla, maybe in during the youth month, we actually have to put DJ Messi on the spot here so that we can profile her because she's doing a lot of work for us in the background, but she never gets to be seen. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we had time for tonight, and this is the African experience. Thank you so much. We're going to meet you again next week, same time, same place, and God bless. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye bye.
24/7. 24/7.
Bold Moves Radio.
Bold Moves Radio.
Afrika, nakupenda sana. Oh, Afrika, nakupenda sana.